Tell me, does this look normal? That's right, not letting animations shine is a huge tactical advantage, and it makes Temple a million times better to play. And of course, longer invulnerability. What's good, folks? It's Nightmare Frame here with a Temple, aka Flare video. After playing Temple for at least 7 hours, figuring him out, my ranking of this frame is okay. He's just okay. Not, oh my god, broken, unbelievable OP. Just an okay frame. He's decent. What can I say? But I do have two things that I do not like. His metronome thing is just below the crosshairs, and it's very awkward to look down here and there just to get the right timing. Hopefully DE changes this to pull it up and make it more in line with the reticle, or just finally give us HUD customization. Like, please. And also DE, why are his eyebrows tied to this color? I can't change my attachment colors without removing his eyebrows. So I'm pretty sure y'all have seen Temple videos here and there, but this is my take on this frame to make him the fastest shredder in the game. You get it? Because he's shredding on the guitar and he can shred enemies. Guys, you get the joke?
Get out.
Let's go over his passive. He has his metronome that is awkwardly placed underneath the reticle, as I stated earlier. If you cast your abilities to the beat, meaning casting them when the needle is within the brackets, you can empower your abilities while filling up the meter to unlock your exalted weapon. That meter is the magazine of your exalted weapon. Think of it like an incarnate magazine. And when you hit enemies with the first and second ability while perfectly timing it, will increase the duration of your third ability and increases its heat damage buff to further boost the damage of your weapons, which includes your heat-based exalted weapon. Additionally, if you perfectly time the ability cast, all abilities will gain 50% efficiency, meaning consuming less energy. Except for the fourth ability, perfectly timing it will have it consume no energy. Win-win. However, what happens if you fail the timing? Then you go out of sync, giving you baseline values of your abilities, and some abilities will have a short internal cooldown, basically putting your abilities out of rhythm. This mostly happens with your second ability because it has its own unique animation lock, which isn't affected by casting speed modifiers. Temple is a fire frame, and he can take full advantage of Arcane Hotshot while maintaining its duration perfectly fine, and does more damage with Archon Vitality. Now onto his abilities. Pyrotechnics. Cast to unleash erupting flame pillars to damage enemies and apply the heat status effect. Strength increases its damage and amount of pillars, while perfectly timing it further increases the amount of flame pillars and buffs the third ability. Overdrive. This second ability releases a wave that briefly stuns enemies and marks them so they are more vulnerable to critical chance. This crit chance vulnerability is flat crit chance, which is a multiplier applied as a flat value after all of your built-up crit modifiers. Strength increases the crit vulnerability, perfectly timing it will buff the third while also doubling the crit vulnerability. Ripper's Wail. This ability halts you in place to play a solo, makes you invulnerable for 4 seconds, regenerates your health and shields, while it also buffs your weapons with heat damage. This heat damage buff can be shared with allies within affinity radius. There's a huge problem with this ability, besides the heat damage DOT not working properly, is that it holds you in place for too long, letting animations shine. I found a way to fix this, where I can take full advantage of the invulnerability and move around as I please, attacking enemies while invulnerable. It has a base duration that you get when you initially cast it, that scales with duration mods and perfectly timed ability casts, while also having a max cap duration that you can achieve when you perfectly time your first and second ability. Now, it's personal preference whether you want to mod duration or go base duration, because it caps out regardless. Secondly, the heat damage modifier scales to a max of 750% when stacked with perfectly timed casts, but it also has an initial scaling which is modified with strength increases. And perfectly timing Ripper's Wail makes your invulnerability last longer. Onto LIZZIE, his exalted flame-throwing guitar. Yes, you heard those words correctly. You want to activate LIZZIE as a perfect cast as you consume no energy. You fire this weapon indefinitely. Just make sure to charge your meter with your first 3 abilities. It deals heat damage, and you can mod additional elements. It has amazing stats with 35% crit and status chance, and a 2.3 times crit damage multiplier, a base fire rate value of 8, a beam length of 10, but can be extended with sinister reach, and that mod is going to be mandatory if you don't want to use this weapon as a melee. While this weapon is out and you aim down sights, your ability bar changes to bonus elements that you can apply on enemies once per cast as it shoots along with your gun, meaning it's a single squirt to prime enemies. This would have been really nice if it applies to your gun as bonus elemental damage. Otherwise, I would never see myself using this, as my companion does a better job. All of these bonus elemental shots have their own stats independent to the weapon, and when you perfectly time your elemental sigils to the beat, you can apply additional procs. And yes, these elemental shots are guaranteed status procs. They also force proc impact. So if you want to use your other abilities normally, then don't use them while you're aiming down sights. As you can see, I'm using Temple without a Helminth, and he works perfectly fine without Helminth, as all of his abilities work really well together. And if you were to put a Helminth, the only one I would suggest is Nourish on the second ability. Roar, Zata's Whisper, stuff like that will not work with Temple, because you would have to replace his third ability. And his third ability is actually a good damage buff, and you don't want to lose that. So if you don't care too much about it, then hey, replace it. Now that you know how he technically works, let's get into how to play him with the ability order, setup, and of course, how to build him. So let's take a look at the gameplay loop. So whenever you start or engage in a mission, you want to start off with your third ability, Ripper's Wail. And when you cast this ability, this will give you the initial buff of the heat damage, and any subsequent ability cast of your first and second ability will build up the percentages. So you never have to cast your third ability again unless you're in a pinch. So I start off with my Matarai, so 2 Void Slings here, and I'll get the casting speed and bonus strength. Cast the third ability, and once I fill up the meter right there, I can cast my fourth ability within the brackets. Second ability, and then you can shoot enemies. You get those juicy red crits. You always want to cast your second and then first ability, because the second ability is like a mini stun on enemies. And when you cast your second ability, there's a slight animation lock. So I can't shoot unless that little animation is done, regardless of your casting speed. And that's pretty much it. And here we are. With the Archon Shards, I have 5 Tavforge casting speed shards. Yes, that's a whole lot of casting speed. That's not all. I'm also using Matarai. Matarai has this nifty little node here called Power Transfer. It gives you 50% casting speed switching back to your Warframe. So a quick transference, boom boom, you cast faster. But of course, before I switch back to my Warframe, I'm going to perform 2 Void Slings with Sling Strength. So I gain 40% strength alongside casting speed. Of course, that's not all. There's this mod called Natural Talent. Natural Talent is additional 50% casting speed. This is the casting speed without Natural Talent and Matarai. That's how long the third ability lasted for. If we use Power Transfer and with Natural Talent, that's how fast the third ability is. So let's take a look at how we built Temple. Alright, going over the mods. I do have some Omniforma here. This is just for some flexibility if I want to change this out to anything else. For the Arcanes, Arcane Hotshot. This grants you weapon crit chance if your abilities apply the heat status effect, and it stacks up to 50 times. At max rank, it's 6% per stack, so you get 300% crit chance. And Molt Augmented. This grants you 60% strength at 250 kills. So, a very nice combo right there. Otherwise, I would sometimes change Molt Augmented to Arcane Acceleration, just for some additional fire rate on LIZZIE. For the Aura, you have 2 choices, Growing Power or Corrosive Projection. However, Corrosive Projection is going to be way stronger because it reduces enemies' armor by 18%, and this will pair well with your heat damage. For the Exilus, we Footmax. That's all you need. There's literally nothing else that you can put there that will benefit Temple. And if you don't have that, just use Handspring. And for my strength increases, I'm going for a broad setup where I want to buff everything equally. So that's why I'll be going with Blind Rage for the 99% strength and the minus efficiency. Remember, negative efficiency doesn't even phase him. And then I'm going to be slapping on Umbral Intensify. I will gain 243% modded strength, conditional strength, modded strength. And with that D polarity, the obvious choice is going to be Archon Vitality. This gives you health. Sure, that's cute, but have a look at its secondary stat. Abilities that deal heat damage will be applied twice, so you're doubling that heat damage. And then we want to have a larger energy pool because it's 215. We can add Prime Flow. And for some consistent sustainability, we'll add Equilibrium. This combo helps quite a lot if you spam your abilities and kill a lot. Otherwise, you can swap this up for bonus range. And I will be using only one range mod with Stretch. This improves the coverage on my first and second ability. It does not affect the beam length of your fourth, nor does it affect the AoE, because this will buff your allies within affinity radius. So Stretch only affects your first and second ability. Lastly, we have 2 flex slots that you can put anything you want. So I decided to go with more casting speed with natural talent. And the last slot can be whatever you want, literally whatever you want. More range, more duration, some additional survivability with rolling guard to cleanse you of status effects, which will be very useful in higher level situations. More shields. And if you want adaptation, if you want to do some little health tanking, Boreal's Hatred, if you want to do that. Literally anything you want here. It is a flex slot for you. That's why I have that Omniforma. And if an augment does come out for Temple, well, I can slot it in right there. But in the meantime, I go with Rolling Guard just to cleanse me of status effects so I don't have to worry about casting my 3 right away if I'm in danger. And if you're invulnerable with Rolling Guard, it'll give you time to just readjust so you can time your third ability perfectly. And not only that, it gives you a longer window of invulnerability. So let's say I get shot, I dodge roll, I have some invulnerability, and then time my third ability for additional invulnerability. And moving on to LIZZIE's build. As you can see right there, we have 105% crit chance, 5.1 crit damage multiplier, and it's modded for corrosive. For the arcane, I'm running primary merciless. On kill, gain base damage. As you can see, I don't have any base damage modded onto my build, except galvanized aptitude. This is a conditional increase, but it also increases our status chance. For the elemental combination, I have corrosive here, infected clip, and stormbringer. Unfortunately, no prime version of these elements, or else it will go really hard. You have crit chance, crit damage, fire rate, very important to have this fire rate mod, and your faction damage of choice. And if you don't care too much about the faction damage, just run Amalgam Serration, as this will give you sprint speed. And of course, do not forget Sinister Reach in the Exilus, as this is mandatory. It adds 12 meters to your beam length, taking it up to 22 meters. So, big cock, small cock. And finally, the companion. It's going to be Savathic over here. You can see the parts right there. And the only reason I use the Hound, I don't know what he's doing. The only reason I use the Hound is that it's able to prime in a wider area and give me some additional survivability as it can disarm enemies. So Reaper Audit for the disarm, Guardian to replenish my shields, and to apply electric. This means you could change, this means if you want, you can change the stretch on your build to Archon Stretch. So for example, we spawn in enemies. It's going to trigger its electric proc right there, Archon Stretch. But I didn't see the need to run Archon Stretch as I'm just getting too much energy. It just felt redundant at that point. But that's for your comfort. You can use that. Duplex Bond, you're going to have it spread out and prime enemies. Send Deconstruct, this is pretty nice. You get health orbs to drop, and that will be converted into energy thanks to Equilibrium. And Manifold Bond reduces the cooldown of these abilities. And everything else is just survivability. Unfortunately, I'm not using a melee, so this doesn't see any benefit. For the weapon, I have Viral and Electric. The reason I have Electric rather than Heat is because I'm already giving him Heat. So again, these are all the procs he does right there. Look at that. The Electric buildup is quite fast. And I can give him some heat And now he procs heat for me. Right there. And because it's an ability that he does, it can keep up my arcane hotshot. Look at that. It's already at 50 stacks, and I didn't use any of my abilities. Well, okay, I used my third ability to give him heat. But yeah, this is my temple loadout with Giga casting speed. That shreds, get it? And does a decent amount of damage. So I do hope you've enjoyed this video and learned something from it. If you did, please feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe for more Warframe content, streams, and so much more. Do refer to the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, a peace. Bye-bye now. Bye.